Today, the Adrian Show will be tackling its first foreign film, and this one all the way from the waters of Japan. No, not Rashomon, not Tokyo Story, and not even Seven Samurai, but this. Godzilla, King of the Monsters. Where are you guys going? Hey, wait! It's a really good movie for its time. You have no idea. You'll rue this day. When Godzilla comes, you guys will be sorry. Now, there are technically two versions of the original Godzilla movie, the Japanese one, just called Gojira, and the heavily re-edited and somewhat longer American one called Godzilla King of the Monsters, the latter of which added new scenes with rising Hollywood actor Raymond Burr as the film's lead. I want to clarify that I'm only going to be talking about the Japanese version here, as it's shorter and I feel better executed. So, with that said, on to the story. A series of mysterious boating accidents have attracted the Japanese government to Ono Island, a small haven that locals claim is haunted by a mythical creature named Godzilla.
Gojira?
While the Japanese government is at first skeptical, increased sightings and boating accidents convinced them to send archaeologist Kiyoshi Yamane to investigate. After a series of footprints and a trail of radioactivity are found, Godzilla is spotted emerging from a mountain before he quickly recedes into the ocean. The monster becomes a great political and moral issue for the Japanese government, as it's found he was formed by their recent nuclear bomb tests in the area. So, with that terrifying fact on the table, what do you think their plan is to kill Godzilla? That's right, bomb him some more, of course. Understandably upset, Godzilla goes on a rampage through Tokyo, leaving a great path of destruction in his wake. During this time, local mad scientist, eccentric marine biologist, Densuke Serizawa, thinks he's developed a weapon he calls the Oxygen Destroyer, powerful enough to finally stop the creature. Only problem, he doesn't feel like using it. I don't know, some hogwash about ethics. Eventually, Godzilla returns for yet another attack on Tokyo. As the casualties and collateral damage pile up, the question remains, will Serizawa use the Oxygen Destroyer against the creature? And if he does, will it be powerful enough to finally halt Godzilla's reign of terror? Now, if this sounds like every other giant monster movie plot, that's because, yeah, it is fairly typical. However, there are a few interesting narrative quirks that I'd like to bring to light here. First and foremost, the fact that the movie doesn't have a clear protagonist until about 30 minutes in. The first half hour is almost exclusively devoted to the confusion of the Japanese people and developing Godzilla as a character, which is fairly atypical for a film in general, let alone a monster movie. Imagine if we didn't meet Peter Parker until 30 minutes into the original Spider-Man, and spent the first half hour watching the Green Goblin commit terrible crimes in New York. Bizarre move, isn't it? Secondly, you see Godzilla a lot more than you'd expect from a film of this era. I swear, he's on screen like every 10 minutes. You definitely get your money's worth. And third, which is probably most interesting, the film shows in great detail the results of Godzilla's destruction, which gives it an overall darker and moodier tone than you'd expect. They're treating this like a real genocide or natural disaster, and this serious tone rubs off on the viewer demonstrably. On the technical side of things, yeah, this is a guy in a rubber suit, but a lot of people don't realize how challenging and innovative this was. While giant monster flicks had certainly been around before Godzilla, they relied heavily on stop-motion animation and large props to sell their monsters. While this was still effective, Toho decided to go for something which they felt would add a new sense of realism to their film, as well as cut the cost, and commissioned their prop builders to create the world's first giant monster suit. And what a suit they built, complete with 200 pounds of suffocating latex, limited visibility, and internal temperatures so extreme the suit could only be worn for a few minutes. As if those qualities weren't bad enough, the suit also had to be submerged in water and set on fire for some of the film's most iconic shots, each element greatly endangering the lives of Godzilla's two suit actors, Haruo Nakajima and Tetsumi Tezuka. All of this effort would have gone to waste if not for the brilliant directing choices of Ishido Honda, who used gritty lighting and low camera angles to not only give the film a feeling of dread, but hide the imperfections of the special effects. The on-screen result is highly admirable for its time. Sure, it doesn't look real, but it's convincing enough to sell the main story. Trust me, in the world of sci-fi, I've seen way worse. For the soundtrack, Akira Ifukube, who scored many of Toho's giant monster movies after this, perfectly captures the weight and menace of Godzilla. His reliance on pounding drums and triumphant brass make his compositions very large and epic. I mean, just listen to some of it. You see what I mean? Great stuff. The actors in the original Godzilla get a surprising amount of screen time for monster movie standards. While I'll openly admit that the language barrier makes it hard for me to judge their performances, they seem very genuine, and I never had problems following the action on screen. So, yeah, acting is fine. The original Godzilla was a very thinly veiled allegory for the Hiroshima bombing at the end of the Second World War. Godzilla, like the atomic bomb, is a senseless and purely destructive product of the nuclear age, and leaves behind him a wake of dead innocents and radiation sickness, very similar to the conditions left after Hiroshima. Further A-bomb references come in the form of the oxygen destroyer, Serizawa's invention that could potentially obliterate human life if mishandled, and the massive moral debates that arise between scientists and politicians on what to do with Godzilla, which echo real-world debates on how to handle nuclear power. This use of monsters to explore real-world fears and issues is nothing new, as it's been a tenet of storytelling since storytelling's inception. I think then what makes Godzilla's allegory so unique and memorable is that it takes the likeness of an event that was still in the public consciousness at the time the film was made. Hell, the opening scene makes an almost overt reference to the Lucky Dragon 5 boating incident, another American-made nuclear tragedy that occurred only a few months before the film's release. The Godzilla crew had balls, and the film's final message proves that they had a passionate message to relay about the horrible nature of nuclear warfare. And for this, Godzilla is elevated from just another monster flick to a fantastic artistic time capsule of post-war fear and hope. Old but never boring, the original Gojira is still a masterpiece of cinema. If you can get past the effects, the film is definitely worth a watch.